Welcome to the Soulfull Sound podcast. This podcast is about celebrating the leaders, teachers, and coaches who guide fellow humans to connect, heal, and discover themselves so they can express their gifts into the world. I am Simone Niles, a coach, sound healer, vocalist, and author. Thank you for being here with me today.
All of my podcasts are special. This is a truly special one because I am joined by the beautiful Will Caminada, who is a multi-dimensional guide, breathwork and meditation facilitator, Pleiadian channel, singer-songwriter, and the author of From Darkness to Light, a continuous journey towards your essence, who happens to also be a dear part of my heart. So glad to have you here today. And I am love to just kind of jump straight in.
Yes, thank you, Simone. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, me too. So let's start with the book, because I know that there's so much that you're doing in the world right now, and your book is something that I know from a little while back. Let's start there, because I know that it really kind of leads into your story and how you got into the work you're doing and everything like that. So tell me about From Darkness to Light, your personal journey.
Yes, well, you've been a part of the creation of this book. You've not only witnessed the creation, but you've helped me create the book, because you're part of my story, you're part of my journey. It actually started when I was living in London, studying music and writing a lot of music. And so at the end of my course, I had my EP with 5 songs. They were very personal. Each of these 5 songs represented something in my journey. So I was talking about self-love, about surrendering, about going deeper in my soul and my spiritual practice. And so when I saw that there was a story behind these 5 songs, I wanted to write more, because songs are great, but it's just 5 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, and everyone understands and resonates with it in a different way, and that's absolutely okay, because that's the beauty of art, right?
Yes,
you release
yes.
it, give that art to others. But in the book, there is the background story of each song, and I decided to do kind of like an interactive book as well, because I talk about my story, but then there's also some journal prompts and meditation, so that the reader can also go through their own journey.
And I remember that. I think obviously I came to your performance as well, and I just thought it was such a creative process that you went through. I loved that you were able to bring that singer-songwriter and marry that with the spiritual guide that you are, and bring this journey together so beautifully. Talk to me a little bit about that creative process, because obviously this is a vulnerable share, right? You sharing your story, your personal story, and bringing it to light through your music. Talk a little bit about the creative process.
Yeah, I think the creative process is definitely a spiritual practice and a spiritual experience of channeling from divine source, from your higher self. And so that was a big part of my spiritual awakening and developing my spiritual practice, because I would use my time to write the songs to whatever brief I had, to make it my spiritual practice. So I would free write, and I was also meditating, thanks to you, because you gave me that 5-minute visualization audio, and that was like the catalyst for me to start meditating. So thank you. And I actually talk about this in the book. You're, like I said, you're part of the book, your mom too, because you both helped me a lot in many ways, but definitely in my spiritual path. And I just think that writing in itself, whether you're going to write a song or just journal, whether you're planning on publishing or posting a post is just an amazing experience because it's very cathartic.
Yes, of course.
Tap into your subconscious mind and into your heart, and there's a lot that can come out of it. So for me, the creative process was just going deeper into my heart, into my subconscious mind, into my soul, and also finding that I want to say vulnerability to share, and have that intention to share so that others can be inspired as well, in whatever way. It doesn't necessarily have to be the way I intended.
Yeah.
But there are different meanings for each song. But like I said, everyone will respond differently.
Yeah, yeah. And you also then, of course, spoke about a particular theme. So just want to touch on a couple of those. You spoke about self-love and you spoke about surrender. So talk a little bit about your journey with surrender. What does that mean for you and how has it unfolded so far in your life?
Do you feel called to use your voice and sound in a healing capacity? Learn how to use your voice therapeutically to facilitate healing and well-being. Whether you want to go deeper in your own healing journey or facilitate others in theirs, this training is for you. This online training runs over 5 weekends and offers theory, practice, resources, and support on your path to becoming a qualified sound healer and for your personal healing journey.
Yeah, I love that topic. And again, you've been with me in moments that I was like, oh my God, I have to totally surrender to something that I don't. And I think I always say that the healing journey is a continuous journey. And the subtitle of the book is A Continuous Journey Towards Your Essence. And I believe that surrender is also a continuous journey. I think it was Gabby Bernstein that said, when you learn to surrender, you surrender more. It's like an ongoing journey of surrendering and trusting as well, because I think surrender and trust are like walking hand in hand. For me, before I wrote the song, I had an idea of what surrender was, but based on, watching Oprah's Super Soul Sunday and reading The Power of Now, but didn't really know what it meant until I think I was guided to make decisions like staying in England, which is something that I thought I wanted so badly, but the universe was like, maybe you have to let go, maybe. And I think that's the most important thing too that I've learned, is that sometimes, many times, it could be that you want something, but that's like your small self thinking that this is the right path for you, or this is the right thing for you, when your higher self is just saying, hello, there's something else for you, or there are many other paths for you. And so that's also, it's scary, but it's a beautiful thing too, because when you surrender and you're like, I thought that this was the path, but now that I surrendered and I let go and I'm trusting that there is a divine guidance, there is an inner guidance even, then suddenly there are so many more paths that you can take. And I think it was your mother that said to me something along the lines of looking at instead of looking at a wall in front of you, look at doors, like many doors in front of you. Right?
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I was going to follow up with a question, but you've kind of touched on it, which are some of the nuggets that I wanted to make sure that I pulled. So it's like surrender. This word can be thrown about quite a lot. And it's like, what are we surrendering to, or what are we surrendering or letting go of, right? And I think what you're touching on is to the universe, your higher self, divinity, your intuition, all those parts that really all make up us, right? There's all us at its truest essence. And I find That is particularly interesting. I've been through not very long, maybe only a few months ago, a moment of really deep surrender in my life. I had to really let go of outcomes, let go of things that I thought I wanted or I did want, but it wasn't happening in the way I wanted it to. And I was thinking about surrender and thinking, what does this journey of surrender really mean? And I always like to visualize it as if I'm just floating in the sea. And when you're just let go and float in the sea, I mean, you are this small being, I mean, let's call it the body, floating in this massive, massive, endless source of water. And so there is something so beautiful and powerful in that, bringing that into it as an analogy that we are that powerful source. We are the water. And so what we're doing is surrendering to us and our, like, as you said, the universe, our higher self, and just allowing the body and the mind to relax and let go. And there's something so powerful and freeing about knowing that there is a divine plan. It's like that old saying, when we plan, God laughs, right? And so I'm learning every day and moving in this journey of surrender every day as life continues to unfold and change. And I just love the idea of really bringing that in through your art. I just think it's such a beautiful way to express it. And of course, I was one of the lucky ones to see you on stage with all of your art and your face paint and your body paint, and just really bringing it to life in such a beautiful way. So surrender.
Thank you. And as you were talking about water, we both love the water and ocean. And one of the songs is called Ocean Flows.
I remember that one.
This analogy, you know, that we are what we live our lives thinking that we are that separate drop, but we're actually the whole ocean, right?
Yes.
And just how to follow that current, and there will be ups and downs, there will be waves, maybe hurricanes, right? But we're never separate from that source.
No, be the hurricane, right? Be the wind. You know, this is a really huge part of the work. When I talk about, we won't go into this too much with your stuff, but when we talk about either the divine feminine and masculine, or alpha and omega, and all the words that describe something so powerful, it's that wild, chaotic nature, that divine feminine energy coming through. Be all of that yumminess, and we all have access to it, right? So it's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And I just wanted to circle back to what you were saying about trusting higher self, trusting the intuition. And I think for me too, one of the things that I've learned, and I'm still learning, is that a lot of times it will not make sense for your rational mind. Like maybe you make a decision that feels really chaotic or really difficult or even painful, but you just know there's something that's higher than your rational mind. You just know that this is the right decision and the right path for that moment. And I believe that there are high probabilities in your path, and if you make a decision that perhaps is taking you away from that high possibility, the universe will guide you back to that outcome or to that route. You know, it's like a GPS. You might make a decision that's taking you to the right and you were supposed to go to the left, but at some point the universe will orchestrate something that will take you back to what you're meant to have or to experience.
Yes, and in that orchestration, it's sometimes painful and hard and heart-wrenching. And then sometimes it's lighter and beautiful, and you're able to kind of sidestep something, right? Because I know in my own recent experience, like I was saying, that was a beautiful and painful experience of having to let go. And also recognizing all the gems and stepping into gratitude for everything that was unfolding because of that trust and that faith and that understanding in that beautiful connection that we have with the divine and with ourselves, and I mean the divine within us.
And sometimes you feel all of that amidst the hurricane. right?
Right. Yes. All of it. All of it. Yes. Yumminess. Okay, so before I move on to some multidimensional stuff, which I can't wait, just touch a little bit on self-love as well, because we are recording this episode on Valentine's Day. It's all
Yeah.
about love for a lot of people. I mean, every day is Valentine's Day for me, but I will say that we are in this energy of lots of love being thrown around, and it's also World Sound Healing Day, so we're going to throw some sound in too. Why not? Talk to me about self-love.
Yeah, huge part of my path to learn to love myself unconditionally and accept myself unconditionally. And I think that was one of the biggest realizations right after I had I call it the big wave of awakening, because I think the spiritual awakening happens in waves, even before we are aware that it's happening. But I think there is a moment or the big wave that really hits your face and wakes you up. And it also happened when I was in London and started to meditate and started to write. And I realized that I spent most of my life not accepting myself, not loving myself, because of my sexuality. And, I hid it for a long time. I was in the closet for a long time. I hid it from my mom and friends and my brother. And so it was a process of, first of all, accepting me, loving me, to have the strength to tell them and know that, even if they don't agree or they say they don't love me, I'm still okay with it.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'd be sad. This didn't happen, by the way.
Yes, I know you're loving family. Yes.
But all of these things go through one's mind, especially when we're talking about coming out. And I think people might relate to this in different ways, because you could come out in different
Of
scenarios.
course. Yeah.
But I do think that it comes down to loving yourself and just really tapping into your heart and knowing that you are love itself, and that is your power. So the song that I wrote for my EP is called Camouflage, because I was hiding my true colors. And in the video I used lots of different colors, because I do think that when you love yourself, you're showing your true colors, and you don't care. It's like you have this and I know you talk a lot about authenticity too. You have this fearless attitude to show who you are and to shine your light. And I think it's a really beautiful one of the most powerful things that people can do, is to really tap into their love and loving themselves, because everything else in your life will unfold.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned a little that we were talking about multidimensionality, and maybe I can link to that topic, and we can talk more about it. But
For sure.
I just want to share it because it's something that I shared yesterday with my group.
Yeah, please.
Inside my program, because mainly going from the 3D into 4D and 5D states of consciousness. And my guide said this once, that the words, they change frequencies.
Frequency, yes.
And you know that because you're a sound healer, so you'll appreciate that. And we can see it as it changes the meaning, but it's more of a frequency change. And that's going to be also very individual according to one's state of consciousness. So when we're talking about love and the word love, from a 3D perspective, we could say that love is a feeling. Love is something that I feel for you, that I feel for my children, my lover. And sometimes we feel like we need love from others as well. We need them to feel the same thing for us. But as you move through the 4D, then you have a different perspective on love, because then you start going, wait a second, I can love myself. I can give that love. And the more I love myself, the more I can love others. Yes. The more I fill up my cup, the more I can love others. But when you get to that 5D level of consciousness, and by the way, none of these are wrong. It's just that it changes the frequency.
Yes.
When you get to that 5D, love changes completely because you understand that you are love.
Yeah.
And that love is not a feeling, or it could be a feeling from a 3D perspective. It's not something you do. It's who you are, and it is a state of consciousness. And that's basically 5D is. It's a state of consciousness that's based on love and oneness, and love as the highest force that there is in the universe that connects
everything. Yeah. Yeah, and because I know a lot of people use the phrase "love is everything" or "love is all there is," and I realize that that becomes trivial if we bring it down to what we would necessarily, as you talk about the feeling or things like that, where it feels like that's all there is, right? So I know that in Greek, I don't speak Greek, but I've had this conversation with many of my Greek friends that there are 7, I believe, words for love. And they use those 7 words because, like you said, the frequency changes. It's almost like if they're 7, they're talking maybe 7 dimensions, right? Which is really interesting. So I really love that concept. And yes, the words and what you say, how you say it, the intention, all of those things matter. And I definitely want to go more into the dimensions because you kind of drew the parallel so beautifully. But let's just backtrack and I want to ask you the question, especially for those listening who are like, what is this dimension stuff he's talking about, right? What is the multidimensional world, whether you do the 9 dimensions or the 3 or the 5, doesn't really matter for me. But what do you mean when you talk about this multidimensional journey or expansion or awakening or healing?
Yeah. Well, I want to preface this also by saying that there are different schools, different ways that one can perceive that. Some people also talk a lot about density, depending on the material that one has read or studied, but basically a dimension is a space, is an arena, and a dimension of consciousness is where that consciousness is traveling through, and everything is consciousness. I see consciousness as a seed, the seed of life, the source, the creator, right? There is one consciousness that we all share.
Yes.
But that consciousness travels through and has experiences, right? So you are consciousness having the experience of Simone, the same way that the plant behind you is consciousness having the experience of a plant.
Spider plant, yeah.
And when we talk about the dimensions of consciousness, I'm talking about the level of consciousness in each dimension.
Gotcha.
And there is no better or worse, because we may have this idea that the lower dimensions are worse than the higher dimensions, or even the 3D is like, oh, so 3D. But that's actually
so 3D. I love it.
Yeah, it's a way of it's a 3D perspective, because in a 3D level of consciousness, we experience duality.
Yeah.
So we'll see things from the perspective of bad or good, negative and positive, dark and light. And even those words, they change frequency and change meaning as you move up through the dimensions. And so this is kind of like the basic concept of dimensions of consciousness. But the thing that I do too that for me is very meaningful is to understand that these dimensions of consciousness are not something outside of us.
Yes.
It's not out there, it's in here. Because everything that's happening out there in the universe, in the galaxies, are happening here too. Like when you think of how you were born, when you think of all the cells and the trillions of beings inside your body working to make sure everything is in harmony, that's happening inside the earth too. Yes. And that's happening in the other planets in the galaxy. So it's kind of like thinking of a multidimensionality, but from a down-to-earth perspective, and bringing the macro into the micro that we are. So that's kind of the basis of this concept and the work that I do.
Yes. And I know that because I've obviously been following you for years. You're someone I love, and I'm going to check you out. And I have to say that what's really been a pleasure to witness is your growth, and to see how you're really finding what lights you up and really taking that and running with it and being able to share and help others. I absolutely love the work that you're doing. So you talk a lot about the 5D. I know you talk about all 9 dimensions, but a lot of what you talk about is like shifting into the 5D consciousness. So let's start there. And then we can talk about the other dimensions, but I also know that you have an amazing video explaining all of them. So I'll make sure to pop the link down in the show notes as well, so that if we don't touch on everything and people want to know more, they can check that out too.
Wow, thank you. And likewise, the feeling is mutual, the resonance.
I know. So much love happening here. Okay, so 5D.
Yeah, we can look at 5D again from a macro perspective, what's happening with the planet and also within us. So let's maybe look at the macro first. So
yes.
Planet Earth, Mother Gaia is ascending, is on her process of healing and expanding too. And she's gone through many cataclysms before. She's also gone through many dark nights of the soul, things that we experience in our lives too. But right now we are at a pivotal moment, because basically around 13,000 years ago, we were at the age of Leo. That's when the fall of Atlantis happened. And the fall of Atlantis was one of the cataclysms. But basically what it meant is the Galactic Federation, which are star beings looking after Mother Earth and the galaxy, basically said, we need to reset. Like this is going too far. And so we were a 5D planet before that. But when they pressed the button reset, they sort of closed the connection with them, the connection with the rest of the galaxy. And I say closed because it's never really closed, but most of the beings here sort of forgot that we had this connection, right?
Yeah.
And a 5D planet basically means there's more unity consciousness. So 5D consciousness, other words for it is unity consciousness, love as a state of consciousness, Christ consciousness, this idea of oneness. So there's more harmony, there's more connection, and not only among humanity, but also other beings as well, including Mother Earth. So there is a deep connection with all beings. And that was sort of shut off. And so since then, we've been in this reset mode, which we could call it a quarantine, like the one we experienced.
Yes, lockdown.
Lockdown. That was much longer than what we've experienced. But it's also interesting to see that now we are at the age of Aquarius, and these gates are opening, and it's curious to see that we've also experienced a quarantine. And in that time, Mother Earth gave us some signs of, I'm healing, I'm bringing myself back into harmony. And you gotta get it together, because I'm getting together. Right. And so I see
reflection also, right? Yes.
Yeah. And I see Mother Earth, I see ourselves as the cells of that being. And so basically what's happening now, if she's going through her healing, her 5D ascension, which is very much related to the heart chakra. And the heart chakra, some people say it's in England, some people say it's in Hawaii, but there is this shift happening with the planet. But because we're not separate, we're also being given the opportunity to receive the light that planet Earth has been receiving through our hearts. And so then going back to us, the micro, right? We are also having this opportunity to awaken and heal and expand our consciousness and really shift our perspective from the limited 3D. And again, the 3D is not necessarily bad. It's just that if you're just in the 3D world, it's going to be a very limited experience. It's going to be a human experience based on fear, based on duality, based on ego. It's very ego driven. And so when you start to awaken and heal and expand, that's when you're experiencing more 5D moments. And that means moments of love, moments of presence, and maybe even bliss. Beautiful. So I hope that makes some sense.
It does. And I actually like that you drew not necessarily the parallel, but you brought in about quarantine and everything, because everyone in the world has experienced a level of that. You know, that was a global event, something that was huge. And you also mentioned the word fear, which I want to touch on, because I think if you think about it, the panic and fear and all the emotions and discomfort and pain and all the things that came up in that lockdown, when a lot of people had, you know, obviously some very, you know, I'm not here to say who had this way and who had it that way, but we all had our experience through this. But there was a lot of fear that we could see in social media. We could see worldwide on news, something that we, in our generations, we never experienced before. So there was a lot of fear. How would you, I'm asking actually about you drawing the parallel from that event, let's call it, to the macrocosm, what's going on at a 5D level, because you spoke about it in reference to maybe losing the connection or not having the, you know, that the access, or not necessarily accessing, we have the access, but not necessarily accessing this 5D energy and frequency and consciousness. So what's that kind of parallel there? If you could kind of pull from that. I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah, totally. I think what's coming to mind now is to talk about the one in between the 3D and 5D, which is 4D.
Okay.
And 4D is very, I think it's very interesting, very kind of complex, because there are different aspects to that dimension. And you could, coming from a very linear mind, because that's how we understand things, but that's not really how things happen. And it's something I always say, because we think of 3D, 5D, you know, we're going up or going down. It's less linear than what I'm sharing, but I do share in a linear fashion, because that's how
we will understand it. Yeah.
So if we're coming from a linear thinking, you could see 4D very connected to that 3D duality, but also the higher 4D is almost there in that 5D love and oneness. But actually, there's a lot of shadow and light dance that happens in 4D.
That kind of crossover, right?
Yeah. And so there is a lot of chaos that may happen, that we see happening outside of us, but also in our lives. And if we're again bringing back to us, to the micro, before you awaken, or you might go through a moment of grief or a moment of pain, like we were mentioning, a hurricane. But there is a light aspect to that, because the next step for you is going to be evolution, is going to be an opening of the heart. Again, from a 3D perspective, and also thanks to a lot of lyrics, we say that our heart is broken. But from a 5D perspective, your heart can never be broken. It can be open more and more. And I think it's Rumi that said that light enters through the cracks of your heart.
Yes.
Right. And so maybe it's not nice to hear that, but we need to go through that chaos, through that darkness, through whatever is happening in the world that you see from a 3D perspective. Yes, there are horrible things happening, but it's the way through.
Yeah.
to get there. And even the word darkness changes its frequency as you move through the dimensions, because from a 3D perspective, darkness is evil, is negative, is something that's chaotic, it's painful. From a 4D perspective, you start to see that there is another side.
Yes.
It's almost as if it's two sides of the same coin. There is a shadow, there's the darkness, but there is a light, and they coexist.
Yes.
And when you move through that 5D level of consciousness or 5D perspective, you understand that darkness is as divine as light, that actually darkness is the divine feminine, the divine feminine energy that we need to create everything.
Yes. That void, that nothingness within all possibility exists. Absolutely.
Yeah. Because when you think of, and the ninth dimension is the black hole of the Milky Way, it is the beginning and the end of this galaxy and the other galaxy. And again, we see in our own creation, that's what happens too. Yes. We need the feminine energy, that's the darkness, and we need the masculine energy, which is the light, but we need both to create life.
Exactly. I love that. And what's interesting for me as you speak about some of those things, I mean, you quoted Rumi. I love Rumi. My mom always used to say, and she said this to me not long ago, so it's quite vibrant in my mind, that it's something along the lines of your heart breaks so that God can shine his light through. Now, I love the word through that you used a few times, because often when people are going through distress or pain or whatever word feels hard as a challenge, everyone will have their own anxious, sad, whatever it might be, all different emotions or, traumas. We have a lot of this. It's really hard. And the only way is through. And that for me, when we spoke about surrender before, those were some of the moments for me that were so beautiful because they were so hard, or because it was painful, or and this and that I could say to myself, there's no way to avoid this, but even if I could, I choose to go through the eye of the needle, because I know that you, as you're saying, that cracking open is needed. It's needed for our growth. It's needed for our evolution. And if only we could just surrender to it, as hard as it can be sometimes. And not, when I say surrender to it, to what we're going through, not necessarily external circumstances, but our own internal thermostat, then I think there's so much that we could all achieve through the hard things that happen in life. And it's such a beautiful way of looking at it. I love the interweaving that you're doing with these dimensions. So, and also that you're making it very practical, because how do we bring these practices into our life? So some of the work you do, and even if you talk about something other than 5D, but let's just throw 5D back in the mix, you speak about helping people shift into this or shift into that. So what are some of the things that people would have to do, or the practices to help that shift occur?
Yeah, I love that you asked this, because practice is a very big aspect inside my program, the Multidimensional Self, and it's just something that I do every week, on Instagram, to help people keep up with their practice. And even like for me, I'm kind of going from talking about spiritual practice, or helping people with the spiritual practice, into the multidimensional practice, because everything you do can be a spiritual practice. Yeah. You can go for a walk or a run, and that can be a multidimensional practice. If you set the intention, you tell yourself your affirmations, you're present in the moment, you may connect with nature. So you're moving your body, and that is a physical, maybe predominantly physical practice, but you're also practicing all of these other dimensions in the same moment. So this is something that I do for myself, and everything that I do for myself that works for me, I share. I also know that it may not work for everybody because we're very unique beings, but you have to experiment. But I would say that, yeah, that's again, coming from a linear way, that's a progression from having just a spiritual practice into a multidimensional practice, and understanding that it's all connected. And I talk about the different bodies as well, bodies in the plural, because we have a physical body, a mental body, an emotional body, or emotional and mental, and the spiritual body. There are more, but these are like the basic 4 bodies that are physical, subtle bodies. They're not separate. Like you're not separate from your mental body or your spiritual body. So why do I have to set a specific time just for my spirit or just for my physical body? So you can integrate the practices. And what I try to do too is giving very simple practices that you can incorporate in your day-to-day life, as we're doing this podcast, as you're working, as you go for a walk, as you're chopping the onions. Everything can be a practice, so that you don't necessarily have to spend 2 hours breathing and meditating. It's nice when you do it, but you can do that every day, right? So it's about having very easy, short practices that you can incorporate. And most of the practices that I suggest are more of an awareness practice, and that is what changes the perspective. So the perspective shift happen because you're practicing on a day-to-day basis, and they're very small practices. And I mentioned your audio years ago. That was a 5-minute meditation. That maybe 5 minutes became 10 and became 20. And I, for a long time, and I still meditate every day, but today in different ways that aren't necessarily me sitting down and closing my eyes. So I can go for a walk or a run. Like recently, my run time has been my multidimensional practice, because I'm in the present moment. I'm telling myself affirmations, and at the same time I'm connecting with the environment, connecting with people around me. So this is what I believe, that that the perspective shifts when you are consistent with practice, and your practice doesn't have necessarily to be something complicated.
Yeah. I love the practicality of it, because I have a strong, I would say I have when I say strong, consistent and long-standing meditation practice, having started from since I was the age of 6, and that has evolved and grown, and I've tried different things and I found my way. But what I find very interesting in that, what you're saying is, I find a lot of the things I do, like you said, very much that integration. So I'll give you a couple examples. I sometimes, because I don't read as much as I like to, I make sure that if I'm listening to an audiobook or something when I'm cooking, the chopping onions and doing other things, that, okay, well, I'm feeding my mind, and my mind is connecting to something in my soul and my, all of these things. So that's one. But I remembered my ex saying to me once, are you going into meditation soon? Because we have a few people coming over. And I was like, what do you mean? He said, when you clean the house, you're always going into this zone where you're just in a place of silence and just getting on with things. That's your meditation. And it was interesting to have somebody else witness it, because I do actually like house chores, unlike many people, but I really get into a flow, just like I get into a flow when I'm creating music or cooking. I'm not a big runner, but when I started running years ago, and I still like to run, that for me feels like meditation. Once I get my breath to settle into the rhythm of the pace and so on, it's a meditation. So I think it's beautiful that you're bringing, hey, this is not, I have to sit down for 2 hours every day, close my eyes and make sure I block everything out, or those things, because I think often that's what people think needs to happen. And that's what puts them off from giving them, themselves the chance to get into any practice, whether it's breath work or sounding or anything that's, like you said, 5 minutes. How quickly you can change your state. So powerful. Such powerful work.
One deep breath can change.
A sigh.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things. Oh, yes, exactly. We're always one moment away from a new reality. So one breath, that's a beautiful way of looking at it. So how can the awareness of all of these dimensions of consciousness benefit our lives? So I know that there are practices we can do, but how does it actually benefit our lives? Talk to me a little bit about that piece.
Yeah. Um, I think that having the awareness of these dimensions of consciousness within you and outside you too, but we've established that it's all connected.
Mm-hmm.
But in your path, in your life, I think that basically it just expands not just your consciousness, it expands your experience. Because I went from having a motto, if you will, that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And you might have heard this.
Yes. Yeah.
And I stand by it. I do believe that this is true. So I'm not discarding this,
Mm-hmm.
but I am going from that expanding into we are multidimensional beings having a multidimensional experience. And so that shifts the perspective because we sometimes think that multidimensional beings are the angels or the Pleiadians or you name it,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a message that they gave me, and that kind of sparkled this idea well, actually, I believe we co-create everything, but that sparkled the idea in me to say we are part of this multidimensional universe. So we are also multidimensional beings, and us returning to that 5D original state means we are expanding our family. We're not just a separate race in a planet.
Yes.
And when you shift from that perspective, also understanding that you are having a multidimensional experience, even though when you look with your physical eyes and when you hear with your physical ears,
Yes.
everything is very third dimensional. And it seems like we're just in this dimension. No, we are connected to everything, right? And we don't even have to go that far, because when you connect with nature, what is nature coming from the soil? That is the second dimension that's supporting this dimension.
Exactly. Yeah.
That comes from the ground, from the soil, all the beautiful plants and trees and flowers and food that Mother Earth provides us with.
Yes.
That is a very strong connection with the second dimension. So I would say that expands your experience, because then you understand, yes, I am human. I embrace it. So
Yes.
these are two words that I often use, is to embrace
Mm-hmm.
and embody. So when you embrace your multidimensionality, you are embracing your ego, you are embracing your human experience, but you're also embracing that you are nature.
Yes.
You are light, that you are sound.
Yep.
Right? That you are love. So you're embracing all of these layers, and then you're embodying through practice, because the awareness is just halfway there, right? You have the awareness, you embrace it, but then the next step is to embody, and you do that through practice, is to bring that awareness into
the body.
Into this physical experience that you're having. So I would say, number one, it expands your experience, because it doesn't feel like a limited experience. And also it tells a lot about yourself, and especially I would say your calling too, like what you came here to do, even though I believe that your soul's purpose is just to be here.
Yeah.
To be here, fully here. One time my guides also have given me this phrase, your being is enough. And they just kept saying, your being is enough. And I went, okay, what does that mean? Like, we're always like, give me more, right? What does that mean? That's too simple. But I just meditate on it, and I always go back to it because that's a very simple but very powerful
It
affirmation,
is.
that you being here is enough, and that is your purpose. But I also believe that we do have maybe gifts that you feel called to share, maybe a calling, or maybe something that you came here to learn and to share. And when you have that awareness of the different dimensions within you, you either learn maybe areas that you can improve in yourself, or you just sort of confirm that you're on the right path. So, for example, I hope you don't mind me using you as an example.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Because you're a sound healer. You've been a singer. Sound is something huge for you, right?
Has been my entire life. Yes.
Your entire life. So that says you're very 7D, and you're very connected to the seventh dimension, because it's all about vibration and frequency and sound, right? But you're also very, I assume and I feel, very 2D, because you have your shamanic practices, and that sort of brings you down to earth and connection with the spirit animals and nature. And this is beautiful because you have two sort of anchors, one that grounds you and connects you with nature in your body and this 3D experience, and one that connects you with the higher dimensions. So you have this beautiful dance between the lower and the higher dimensions, and that's what we need. And when you learn more about them, you can either just confirm and you go, yeah, I think I'm on the right path, or you can go, yes, I really love the seventh dimension. So I think that my calling has to do with me using my voice somehow, or using more sound healing in my practice. Or you can go, I realize I'm really connected to nature. So maybe my calling has to do with taking care of Mother Earth, or being an activist for the environment. So it can give you a lot of guidance to an understanding of yourself.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. Thank you for using me as an example, because I didn't think about it that way. So now I have something to ponder on, which is always lovely. We always learn. But what I find interesting, my mom always used to say, and I know we both are saying my mom always used to say very often, I'll have to tell her to watch this episode. But she always said, we call ourselves a human being rather than a human doing for a reason. And I just love that, because being and letting go and surrendering and just allowing and all of that is such I would say, a very big conscious practice of mine these last few years. I'm very productivity and let's get this stuff done and goals and everything, but I can let go of a lot of that, and very often all of it, in moments that just feels like, you used the word bliss earlier, that just feels like bliss. And I often find in my own work and my own practice that I have to ground a lot. I do have a strong grounding practice through sounding and nature walks and all the other things that I do, because I love this floating away into these other realms so much, that I also notice that I need to come right back down and ground into being able to do and not just be, if that makes sense. So I completely relate to what you shared and what you're saying. And now I'm thinking of a few other people. I'm gonna have to go around and go, you're in this dimension, and you're in this, it's gonna be cool. When I do your course, I'll be able to be very well versed, I'm sure.
Yes.
Oh, so amazing. There's so much more that I can ask you. So I think I'm just gonna have you back on for part 2, because we'll just have so much more yumminess to come through. But as you mentioned sound, what sound do you love, Will? What's a sound that you love?
What's the sound that I love? Well, the first thing that comes to mind is the bird song. Just the birds. And I think the bird song is very, very connected to the higher dimensions. And so, and I think everybody, even unconsciously, when they hear birds singing. There's just a shift in the energy. So I would say that's what came to mind first.
Yeah, yeah. Well done for sticking to one. I have most people give me two or three. You
Yeah.
managed to pull it out quickly. That's amazing.
I'm thinking mostly because, I live in a busy area.
Yeah.
So I hear a lot of cars and
Other
horns and
bits and
stuff.
that, and yeah.
But the bird kind of cuts through. So when I hear a bird, it's like everything else
Just goes and quiets
just goes
down
away.
and yeah, yeah. Oh, hmm. I can just sit here with you for a few minutes, but I don't know how long people will want to watch us just staring and loving up on each other. So maybe we'll wrap this up soon and do some more staring and loving off each other after I press stop, right? But before that, huge thank you. Thank you so much for coming onto this podcast and being in my life and being such a beautiful part of it and my journey and witnessing my evolution as I witness yours. And it's just such a pleasure to know you and to love you. And I just want to say I celebrate you for all that you are and do to help people to embrace and embody this multidimensional self that will really open up so many things in the healing and transformation that we all have access to. So thank you for the work that you're doing in this world. It's such a beautiful thing.
I receive it.
Mm.
I receive the love. Thank you. And likewise, I know but you are a huge part of my life and my journey. And I'm so grateful that our paths have crossed
Yes.
again in this lifetime. And my heart is joyful to know that, our connection is eternal and it will live on forever.
Definitely, always. And my final question that I like to ask, before that, where can people find you? And you've spoken about your course a few times. Tell me very briefly about that. Where can people find you online? I'll pop the links underneath, of course.
Yeah, people can find me online, mostly on Instagram, YouTube as well, and my podcast. It's all under Will Caminada, except my
Amazing.
Instagram, it's Guy Will, but if you type Will Caminada, you'll find me too. And there are groups throughout the year of the multidimensional self. It's 9 weeks. So
Brilliant.
basically every week we go deeper into learning about a specific dimension. During the week, you have those little practices. And then at the end, we have a healing session with breathwork and meditation, some sound healing too, which, by the way, I'm learning more with you because I'm taking your training.
Yes.
So that I'm going to
Amazing.
be incorporating more of that in the program too. And also, it's a 9-week journey, but people become part of the community as well for a lifetime. So I'm building that community of like-minded, like-hearted people that are on this path. So
Yes.
yeah, and
Well, I
you can
can't
go to
wait. Yes, definitely pointing everyone there. All the links obviously will be there. So my final question to you is, what is your soulful sound to the world? A self prayer or desire that you wish upon the world?
Well, because I've listened to your podcast before, I knew that you were going to ask this, but I actually didn't want to prepare. I just wanted to see what would come up. But I think based on everything that we've talked about, my soulful sound, my prayer is that we go back to that state of consciousness that we call love, that we live from that space of oneness and unity consciousness where love is the foundation, love is what connects us. And I think we are going towards that direction. It may look like it's a slow process and a slow journey, but I believe that we're heading towards that love, that 5D. And if we're here, and if you're here listening to this or watching this, then we're contributing to that by
that
being
shift.
the love.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much.
So basically this is my
So much love. I mean, it's just been pouring through the screen and through well, there's no limits or anything separating us on our energy. We can feel each other all across the seas. So thank you again for your love, your time, your presence, and all the amazing stuff you've shared. And I will definitely be having you on for part 2. Mwah.
Thank you for having me, and I'm waiting for you on my podcast.
Soon. Let's make it happen. Mwah. Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to share it with your friends and remember to subscribe. From my heart to yours, sending you love, healing, and sound wherever you are.